So this video aims to give a basic, super practical understanding of how to use microphones and cameras together to make amazing sounding videos. Sound is the most important part of the video, and I would say that because I work for Rode microphones, but it's true. You can genuinely have the best looking video on earth, but if it sounds echoey and thin or hissy or tinny and distant, the result is unprofessional and it's unwatchable. But if you do the reverse, you can have very grainy, shaky, kind of verite style video. But if it's got amazing sound, the result is watchable. The result is documentaries and horror films. So this video, this talk, will explain in the most practical way what you need to know, what you need to have, how to use it. Literally, I'm going to talk about like what settings to use on the mics, what settings to use on your camera, and where to place the mics especially, so that you can get professional audio no matter where you may find yourself that day. I am going to assume that you, like me, are a videographer who produces a great deal of videos by yourself, because it's so important that we're able to get good results as a one-person videography team these days. Firstly though, proof. Sound is more important than picture. This, by the way, is a Michael Moore quote, I think, and also pretty sure attributed to George Lucas too. Both who make things where sound is very important. If you're making documentaries and running around, it needs to sound good to get the story. And in case of George Lucas, you have Star Wars, where there's a whole auditory world to that film. Take, for example, the voice casting of James Earl Jones as Vader versus the on-set audio of Dave Prowse. That idea that Vader would be from the West Country versus this big, booming, resonant voice. Sound matters. And I want to also just give you a very practical example here right now. So, right this very second, you are listening to me in a kind of medium-sized drawing room with all of my, my drinks and stuff behind me. And I'm using a Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, which is a shotgun mic. We will talk about what those are in a sec. Arm's length away. It's right here, just out of shot. Sounds pretty good. There's a tiny bit of the room I can hear, but it's as close as I can practically get the mic. Sounds pretty good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the mic away and let you hear the inbuilt microphone on my Sony A7S. Okay, so now this is the sound of the inbuilt microphones on the Sony A7S, 7 odd feet away. No diss to Sony, love this camera, but probably sounds quite different. Okay, so then this is the VideoMic Pro Plus, but on the camera, where many people tend to put video mics. And it probably sounds quite echoey. You'll be able to hear a lot more of the room and a lot less of me. You notice the difference. There's a significant difference to the amount of room noise that you will hear depending on the type of microphone and where it's placed. This is the secret to getting amazing sounding audio in just 15 words. Genuinely. True. Buy the best microphone you can afford and put it as close as you possibly can. Now, it might seem I'm being overly reductionist, but that genuinely is the secret. The bottom line here is just like in photography, that's saying that the photograph isn't good enough if you aren't close enough. That applies to audio as well. So if you do just one thing, remember, get the mic closer. It solves so many of the problems such as echo, room noise, ambient noise, and hiss as well, coming from a variety of factors, and we'll talk about those. Get the best microphone you can afford, but get it as close as you possibly can. That's genuinely the secret. Let's talk about issues that you have with your camera so you can understand why we need a dedicated microphone. A camera by itself is not selective. It has little microphones which are designed to pick up sound in all directions equally in most cases. And so it can't choose from the thing that you're pointing the camera at versus the things that are happening around it. So, if you're pointing the camera at me speaking, but there's a bus going past in the background, or there's, some kids playing in the background, shouting and screaming, it's going to pick up them just as much as it's going to pick up me. What is important about having a dedicated microphone is it allows us to take it off the camera and get it closer to the thing that we are trying to record. And as we know, getting it closer is the most important thing that we can do. The other problem is that cameras tend not to have wind protection. So when you film outside, wind blows onto the camera's body and it blows into the holes that are allowing sound to get in and causes that kind of flumpy, windy sound. And because it's a built-in microphone on the camera, you can't necessarily wind protect it. There are some little stick-on things that some companies make, but they don't always work with every model of camera. It's not ideal. But the bottom line here is that because we know we have to be close, often we aren't able to get our camera close. So when it comes to choosing a microphone, one of the most important things is that we have something that will work conveniently with our cameras. I'm not talking about very high-end solutions in this video, with mind to the fact that I'm also not talking about complex, high-end pro shotgun microphones that require the use of a dedicated recorder that has phantom power, i.e. you need more equipment to get the best from something like this. What I am specifically suggesting are things that you will be able to plug directly into your camera so that you, just as a videographer, can capture audio easily on the go. The other benefit of capturing the audio directly to camera, as I am doing right now, is I don't need to synchronize audio clips at the end. If you record audio separately using a hard disk recorder, a solid state recorder and a shotgun mic, you do have to synchronize the clips at the end, which is not the worst thing in the world, but it is an additional step that you'd have to bear in mind. We're going for the most convenient one-person solution that gets the best possible results here. So bearing in mind that we want something that will plug straight into our camera for maximum convenience, you have 3 different microphone choices. So the first are mono shotgun microphones, which is actually what we're using right this very second. The second are stereo video mic style on-camera microphones. And then the third are lavalier, i.e. tie clip style microphones like the SmartLav Plus or the Wireless Go system, which we have now. Which one of these 3 do you need? Well, the answer to that depends, I think, on what you film. If you intend to film dialogue, that is, people speaking, first and foremost, I would recommend that you get a mono shotgun microphone as your primary choice. Now, I say that because a mono shotgun microphone are the types that are directional. Like the high-end pro shotguns like this, they aim to pick up sound in a kind of cone shape. Imagine like an ice cream cone coming out of the end of the mic. So that via the magic of physics, they pick up more of what you point them at and less of what's going on around you. And now they aren't a magic bullet in the sense that they don't pick up absolutely any of the environment. There is still some of the environment around, and that's also what helps contribute to it sounding real, or like you're really in a place and not in a recording studio. But it is more selective, and it makes it so desirable when you're trying to pick up what you're pointing at. And by the way, mono shotguns, although mono means single channel of audio, will almost invariably output a stereo signal. And what they'll do is they'll just copy that same signal into both the left and the right channel, so that when you plug them into the 3.5mm jack on the side of your camera, that's the tiny little microphone import, then in your final video file, you will see that the sound is equal in both channels. You don't have this thing where it's only in the left or only in the right. But a stereo microphone is very different. It's going to actually give you true stereo that works like your ears work, where you have an independent channel for left and an independent channel for right. And a stereo microphone I would use for ambience and kind of everything else. For example, if I was shooting a wedding, if I was kind of capture the kind of ambience of guests arriving and the kind of the vibe, the band are playing, there's music, there's people chatting all around us, and I was moving through the crowd, invariably I would want to use a stereo microphone to pick that up, because watching the video back, I'd get this wonderful kind of 3D sort of immersive sound. You know, things really would be off to the right if they were right when I filmed it. But the moment I wanted to record one of the guests saying, you know, how much they love the bride and groom and, you know, wishing them all the best in the world, I would switch to a mono shotgun mic to capture that. I would literally change the microphone around, point the mono shotgun, and I would get as close as I can, because then I really just want to hear those people speaking to the camera. I don't want to hear the ambience anymore. Now, this third choice, lavalier, tie clip style microphones, these address the point that if you are trying to capture speech and you cannot get your microphone to within an acceptable distance, and I would say in a dream scenario, an acceptable distance is arm's length, but really 5-6 feet or so away, if you can't get any closer than that, you should be thinking about using some kind of wireless system, because a wireless system puts the microphone right on the speaking subject, nice and close, and it beams its audio to the camera, and you can be up to 70 meters away and still hear the person as if you're right up close to them. Again, it's this whole point of closeness is important. So it might be that you buy a mono shotgun, but that you also get a wireless system for the times where you just can't get close enough with your mono mic shotgun to get an acceptable result. And by the way, the SmartLav, as a little sort of plug for this thing, is a lavalier microphone that can plug directly into the headphone port of a smartphone. You can record using the Rode Reporter app, which is free, and afterwards you would upload the audio files and marry them up with the video. There is a little bit of work involved in doing that, but this thing is a crazily affordable solution. It's just something that's worth having in your kit bag for those moments where you're like, oh, I can't actually get my mono shotgun close enough. So, okay, we've chosen a microphone and we know we should get it as close as possible, but what settings do we use on both our mic and our camera? So firstly, the microphone. Initially, let's start with a little bit of physics and human biology. Here is a frequency plot for human voices. Frequency plot meaning that down here at 0, we have low bass noises. And up here, up at 500 hertz, we have kind of semi-mid-range, heading on to kind of tweeting bird noises. And you can see here there are two curves. The blue line showing where male voices tend to exist, and the red line showing where female voices tend to exist. Generally speaking, of course, these are massive generalizations, female voices tend to be slightly higher in pitch than male voices. And so it's important to know this just so that you understand that the human voice does occupy a part of the frequency spectrum for reasons that we'll understand when we start unpicking the whole EQ and how do we get a human voice to sound as good as it possibly can. I mention this because on the back of these microphones, you will discover clandestine switches that seem meaningless. I want to just explain what some of those are. Most importantly, this one here that looks like a little sort of scoop, the kind of scoop icon, and that is a high-pass filter. Now, what a high-pass filter does is it takes away the very, very low-end rumble and mud. For a variety of reasons, when you film in the real world, you can encounter very, very low bass, particularly if, for example, you're recording by a street side and there's cars going past in the background, or even if you're shooting inside but there's a road outside the window, the very, very low bass rumble of cars, which you might not be aware of when you're filming, can get into your audio. And so what a high-pass filter does is it takes away all that mud, but what it does not do is go high enough to touch the human voice. It's designed specifically to get rid of everything below the male human voice. But actually you will see on certain Rode microphones, for example, there is a 2-stage high pass filter, one where it's set to 75 Hertz and the other set to 150. Those are specifically designed for male and female voices in a typical scenario. So bear those factors in mind. And as a general rule, you can in most scenarios leave high pass on without any second thought. The only situation that I would leave high pass off would be if I was recording a band and I really, really needed to hear like a kick drum or a bass guitar. I needed to hear the low end. Then I would turn off the high pass. But in most situations, I would leave it on. And so then this final setting is probably the most important, and that's this -10, 0, and +20. What this is the sensitivity setting of the microphone. And there is a really, really important factor here, which is that most camera manufacturers, being camera manufacturers, have put most of the quality of circuitry and the sort of design prowess into the imaging component of cameras. And it tends, as a very general rule, to be that the audio input circuitry that's behind that little mini jack that you plug these microphones into, that is not of the highest quality. So that when you plug a microphone in and turn up the manual audio settings on your camera, and we'll talk more about this in a sec, you were getting hiss with it as well. And so Rode came up with this solution, which was to make the output volume of the mics selectable and make it so that it could be louder than a normal microphone could be. Because then what you would do is turn down your camera and you would hear that the hiss will fall away. Because Rode, being an audio company, have put all of their emphasis into putting the highest, cleanest possible audio circuitry into these devices. This then becomes of critical importance when we talk about how to set up a camera. So what you will have to do on your camera, and all cameras are slightly different, but you will go into the menu settings and there will almost invariably be a choice of having auto sound settings and manual sound settings. You have to change them to manual. I'm afraid you should never have them on auto, because in an absolute nutshell, auto will tend to ruin sound whenever it gets the opportunity, mostly because it's going to try and amplify silence. When no one's speaking, it will try to amplify that signal and it will increase the hiss when it does. So use manual audio settings at all times. And the trick is, this one weird trick to get good audio, make the microphone as loud as it can be. That means that if you have the +20 on your microphone, you should enable it. And then you should get the person that you're filming to speak, like I'm speaking now, and you should, in your manual movie settings, adjust to taste so that you are getting the levels. You'll see a kind of little level meter bouncing around to kind of be hitting about 3/4 of the way up. It should never touch the end, because that means you've recorded too loud and potentially distorted the sound. And you also don't want it to be too quiet. You want it to be hitting about 3/4 of the way. That might mean that it's slightly going into the yellow, or that it's on certain Canon, there's a little 12 indicator. That's referring to -12 dB. That would be an ideal standpoint. But I can say generally, have it about 3/4 of the way. And you want to make sure, again, that you have +20 on your mic. What you might find is that you're in a loud shooting environment, you're in a noisy warehouse or something, there's lots of stuff going on. You may discover that no matter how far down you go on the camera settings, you can never get it quiet enough. And that is a sign that you actually should move down from +20 to 0. That means that the noise is so loud that you need to reduce the sensitivity of the mic. And actually what you may find, for example, if you were recording a band, like you were at a festival and you're stood by the main stage and you're perhaps using a stereo mic as you might to record music, you might actually have to put that on -10. And what -10 is doing is it's making the mic super unsensitive. But because there's so much sound, it'll sound just fine. And again, you then adjust the camera setting to compensate, whilst also getting the mic as close as you can. So I just want to talk a bit about placement, and we'll use this as a way of kind of summing up a lot of the tools and bits and bobs that we've talked about. Here we've got like 3 different images from Stanley Kubrick film shoots, where you can see that the scenario has kind of led to the need for different types of placement. You can see here Vivian Kubrick is doing a kind of documentary style shoot. She's shooting her dad making The Shining, and she actually has a shotgun microphone attached to the camera, which is a great way of being able to be mobile and move around a set and still get some directionality and focus. But you can see here, during the filming of A Clockwork Orange, they're using a shotgun microphone as well, like the one that Vivian is using here. But because it's to capture the main audio for the film, the guy is using a boom pole and is holding the mic up over and pointing it at the actor, getting it as close as he possibly can. Now, very important to say, because the most important thing here is getting close. I should also say that if you have any of the video microphones, you can get boom poles, Rode make boom poles, and a little extension cable called a VC1. And that allows you to use these video mics in the same kind of way. And if you have that option, you should do it too. Actually, what I have here is I have attached my video mic to a mic stand, so it's kind of doing what is happening in this picture for me. But I just want to stress how important it is to do that this kind of scenario is only when you don't have the luxury of doing this. And then lastly, you can see here where they're doing super wide shots where they're chasing after the actors, and there's no way that they could have possibly used a shotgun microphone. You can see that they use radio microphone systems attached and actually hidden on the person, so that the person is free to run and roam, but the sound is being recorded nice up and close. So 3 different scenarios necessitating 3 different approaches. I think one of the main things is learn your equipment and do lots of tests. You get to learn whether you can be further away and have it sound good. One thing, for example, is that in a room that maybe has even more soft furnishings than I have in here, you can have the microphone further away and there's less echo. So you can be further away and still get an acceptable result. And lastly, a very quick word on EQ and compression. I'm going to make a separate video about this, which will be linked. So if you want to get more of an in-depth, watch that. But in an absolute nutshell, what EQ does is it's designed to change the frequency distribution. You remember we looked at that chart before. And so it can bring some sweetness back into an audio recording if it sounds a bit muffled, or it can get rid of some low-end bumps and noises if we don't want them. So it can be used both as a corrective and as a sweetening tool. And then compression, what that does is it evens out the difference between quiet bits and loud bits so that all the audio is kind of on an even keel. And as a person's moving around and talking and you're getting a performance or you're doing an interview, there'll be a natural change in volume. So some compression is incredibly important to help even out your recording so that you've got a professional sounding result. I highly recommend that you Google LA2A style compressors, just as a personal suggestion. They're some of the easiest to use and most forgiving. I use them loads on doing audio stuff. And lastly, a word on denoising. If you've recorded in a noisy environment, there's kind of ambience or there's some hiss because you've used the wrong settings, I would highly recommend that you check out Isotope RX, which is a higher end noise and audio correction system. There is a more affordable version called Elements. Isotope RX has saved my bacon more times than I can possibly hope to admit. And it basically can denoise, sweeten and do EQ and compression as well, but it's at its absolute best, it's almost black magic, where it can just do the most insane corrective things to audio. So Errors that I thought were unsolvable have been solvable with that software, and no, they're not paying me. I actually genuinely use it all the time. It's literally the best thing ever. So not something that you want to use necessarily, but if you have to, it's there. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. I have a little suggested shopping list. Of course, this is, I work for Rode, so I'm going to suggest you buy things, right? I would say you need a good pair of headphones first and foremost. Sony MDR 7506s I really like personally. I've used them loads. The Rode VideoMic Pro is probably the best sort of mid-range of the mono shotgun microphones. Of course, if you want stereo, there is the stereo VideoMic Pro as well. And there are grander microphones like the VideoMic Pro Plus that you are hearing here, which have more bells and whistles. But the VideoMic Pro, if you kind of, that's what I would consider the sort of entry-level pro microphone. And then the Dead Cat VMP is the furry wind cover. So for shooting outside, you can put a furry wind cover over these microphones and get clean, wind-free audio. Then the Micro Boom Pole and VC1. The Micro Boom Pole is a boom pole that will work with the VideoMic Pro, and it's just a really nice, small, portable, lightweight solution. There are other boom poles too, and with the extension cable, that just allows you to hold it up and over and get nice and close to your speaking subject. And then finally, as a wireless system, the Wireless Go, one of the easiest, most simple wireless systems that you could possibly hope to have. Just turn it on, pairs automatically, has its own little batteries built in, that has a mic built into this one, that goes on your camera. So you can just clip this onto the person and just go. So you're getting wireless audio for a crazy, crazy price. And the final thing, there is a Lavalier Go, which is the compatible lav, so that you can turn this into a lav-based wireless system. And then these new accessories, the DCS1 and SC11, what they let you do is plug two microphones into one camera. So you remember me mentioning the stereo left and right thing? They can allow you to plug both a Wireless Go, for example, and a shotgun into one camera. So you could have two different styles of shooting at the same time on one camera with one mini jack input, which is super cool. So check out those, but mainly whatever you get, be it Rode or any other brand, get it close. Get your microphone close. That is the number one thing you can do. And the rest is practice. Thanks very much for watching. Ask questions if you have them. And if you'd like to learn more about eco compression, check the link below for that video. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.